Доброго ранку, шановні гості, колеги-журналісти. Український кризовий медіа-центр розпочинає свою роботу.
We start our work and we are going to speak about attraction of foreign investment. We have guests from VoxUkraine and they are going to tell us about the index of economic freedoms, and I give the floor to Mr. Davidenko, editor at VoxUkraine. I'm a chief editor of VoxUkraine, and today we are going to speak about foreign investment in Ukraine. Of course, this is a very important topic, and for Ukraine it is difficult to overcome the crisis, and it is evident that the government that came to power after Maidan, they are not good at attracting financial investments. And you know that in 2015 they improved indicators, but this is that was done by the National Bank, and there are some reasons as war, loss of territory, and that deteriorates the climate for investment. But this is not the main reason. Ukraine takes 162 place in the rating near Solomon Islands. So we are repressive economy, and we tried to analyze the rating and found the weakest places. The power should have done something to improve situation of Ukraine in this rating, and also we found several steps how to improve the situation in our state, and we invited Svetlana Rusakova, head of proprietary trading at Dragon Capital, also VoxUkraine participant. Svetlana is given the floor. As it was told by Boris, the topic was to analyze economic freedoms, where Ukraine got the lowest number of scores. Why economic ratings are so important? Because they contain the factors that are interesting to investors when they decide whether to invest their money in the country. So we can work on our weaknesses and to create an attractive investment climate for investors, foreign investors, and maybe, of course, our Ukrainian investors would also be happy with this. And why our investments are so important for Ukraine? They are needed for sustainable development of Ukraine. Also, they stimulate economy. And in 2014, the volume of direct foreign investment fell to $300 million. This is a minimum. And previously it was 1.4 billion, and in 2013 it was about 1.2 million, and this is mainly in the banking sector. So we can't say that these are live money. Can you provide us with the video, with the presentation? Let's look whom we lost during this year. From 2009, Ukrainian banking sector was left by 17 banks with foreign capital. The last one, Unit Credit Bank, and the transaction was finalized in 2015. And in this slide, you may see the biggest oil and gas corporations that started plans on shale gas, but all these projects now are postponed or the companies rejected the project. On the slide, there's IKEA Corporation. It has a policy towards the fighting bribery, and they were not able to establish their office, and Wizera and OBI also left the Ukrainian market. And among the reasons they stated why they left, they mentioned non-transparent market and unfair competition. So what indexes and ratings we have here? We know S&P, Moody's, Fitch. We have also other indexes that estimate overall economic situation in the country. Doing business that identifies and assess whether it is easy to open a new business, and Ukraine takes 83rd place in this rating. Also, the index provided by Transparency International here is 130 place out of 168, and the index of economic freedoms, Ukraine takes 162nd place out of 178 places. This index of economic freedoms, it is composed of 10 components that are divided into 4 groups. We selected those that had the lowest number of scores, 30 or less: investment, financial freedom, and also freedom from corruption and property right protection. For each of this component, we analyzed these indexes, how they are estimated, and what the power proposed. We looked at coalition agreement, what was stated there, and also why Ukraine got this low number of scores, and we tried to find out what Ukraine should do in order to have 50 scores in this ratings. Economic freedom, the index. If there's freedom in the country, for this country is good for investment, and it has 100% of scores, and Ukraine got only 20 scores here. The reasons are bureaucracy, procedures, limitations on investment in some sectors, and also procedures and also issues with privatization and allocation of agricultural lands to foreigners. The power said that they will deregulate the market and harmonize the legislation on rights, and also they will provide transparent privatization. And if we look at the work that has been done, we may say that they adopted the law on deregulation. They lifted 170 state standards, also financial liberty, financial freedom. This is the intervention of the state in financial sectors, and here Ukraine got 30 scores. Why? It is the regulation of the banking system and financial market, also a big number of bad credits in the bank portfolio, and also some obstacles for international financial institution and low level of development of financial sector, and also privileged position of institutions with state share. And also the work has been planned, and the power, they said that they will clear market from troubled banks and to develop the procedures and complex strategy on development of state banks. Some work has been done, and the liquidity of the bank was increased. The strategy was adopted, and a complex of measures on the rights of the creditors and also the standards of the disclosure of information. But this is only enough for 30 scores in the segment. So freedom from corruption. So this is how this index is assessed. Ukraine has 26 scores here, and the state delays the work of anti-corruption bodies, and the power appoints the anti-corruption bureau heads, and also this index is negatively influenced by the interaction between business and power. So these anti-corruption projects were full-scaled. We were promised a new policy in the different spheres of reforming justice system, and also to create some state institutions to fight corruption, but they did little. And they started the work of Anti-Corruption Bureau, and also the law on state financing of parties to fight political corruption. Also, the system of open data was started, and the registers of state property was open, and some schemes of corruption were liquidated. And the last component.
The last component at which we look, this was protection of property rights. Here, the should be in place the legislation aimed at protection of the investors' property and intellectual property right protection. Here, Ukraine has got only 25 points because of the corrupt judiciary system, existent cases of expropriation of private property, and also the low level of protection. Nevertheless, among the positive steps, these were the past law on the right of judiciary and some other regulations. So what should be done to get at least 50 points for the better situation, the large-scale privatization should be held out. Also, the simplification of the bureaucratic procedures, cancellation of the moratorium on land sale, and protection of the investors' rights. Also, the to sanitize the financial system for the sanitation of banks and development of banking system should be carried out. The share, state share in banks should be sold. Also, the access of banks to financing should be simplified, and the bad credits portion in the credit portfolio of banks should be cut down. The anti-corruption work should be strengthened the electronic declaring system should be launched, and the profound judicial reform should be carried out, and strengthening property rights. Again, independent work of judiciary and court system, political will of the top leadership of the country, and political non-partiality and non-participation of the leaders. Our next speaker is Voldymyr Semenikhin, Director for Business Development and Regulatory Policies at the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade of Ukraine. The authorities of Ukraine do not stay indifferent to the investment attractiveness of the country, and the previous government and devoted attention to the development of investment climate. Also, the current government has set the goal in its program Ukraine 2020 to bring Ukraine into the position of top 20 countries in terms of business climate. So my question to you, Voldymyr, now is what are you doing to reach this target, and how you plan to improve the situation in reality? Good morning, everybody. Why we focused our attention at doing business ratings, and why we have set this target to reach the top 20 countries list in this rating. And this rating is simple. It allows to measure, to check how the business environment is convenient for running SMEs. And in many countries, all those indicators which are covered by this rating, they have well-developed legislation, and they have a lot of small and medium-sized enterprises, which are very proactive in searching for new markets, in penetrating into new markets, and in growing in new markets. So this is an answer partially to a question why the government had selected that very rating as the target for us. Also, the World Bank is a rather reliable and reputable international organization, and we may rely on their methods of measuring. How do we plan to act? During the last 7 years, Ukrainian government had been acting in the old way. When having set some targets, it simply gives an order in assignment to the ministries to reach some figure set by the cabinet of ministers, and that's it. Unfortunately, it appeared to be rather inefficient because it resulted in some fragmental changes and improvements. Well, we decided to change this approach. So what is our current way of work? instead of 10 working groups improving our various experts in doing business, which proved to work very inefficiently. Some of them just imitated some progress, some of them remained in existence, some of those working groups never gathered. So now the Ministry of Economy had established the Better Regulation Delivery Office, which currently involves the best experts. The office started to work in September. In October, we produced the roadmap for improvements. Then we wrote down the action plan for the government and for the parliament. In December, the cabinet had passed 46 items in those action plan, which dealt with necessary regulations, legislation, etc. As of today, we have prepared for passage half of those items. That is, we have drafted the half of that package of legislation, which has to be passed by the parliament. But the problem is that we have the not fully capable parliament. How did the parliament work in, how much did the parliament work in February? These were just 4 working days of parliament. How do you think whether the parliament is able to act if they work just 4 days per month? We can draft any laws with any degree of perfection, but since the parliament is not working, then we are unable to work, actually. That is, my message is that without workable parliament as an institution, we won't reach any progress in reform implementation. That's why I believe that those who are sitting here today, the representatives of NGO, should keep this in mind and think properly how to make good pressure on the parliament from civil society. The parliament has to work. This is the important message which we should repeat again and again. Within a week, the parliament is able to pass up to 40 laws in order to improve our position in the doing business rating. We have to pass just 46 laws. All those laws do not stay under the carpet or in somebody's drawing box. No, they are on the table. They were discussed by broad public, by NGOs, by experts, by civil activists, and they are ready for passage. That is, since the parliament has to pass up to 50 economic laws to improve our rating in the doing business rating, so they should work not just for days per month. Of course, there are more difficult ratings for improving Ukraine's position, like the Index of Economic Liberty, but and here improving Ukraine's position will be much more difficult because our Ukrainian institutions are very weak. But just an example, getting a new post address for the new construction site is next to impossible, and this is again one of the reasons why investors are not very eager to come to Ukraine. The companies are absent in Ukrainian market, not just because of the high level of corruption, but because of the much smaller technical difficulties. For example, we still do not have the master plan of Kyiv. Whether there is any interrelation, whether there is any relation between improvement of the investment climate and your actions. Of course, there is a relation. There is an indirect and direct relation with the business climate. Just for example, if an investor wishes to connect his new enterprise to the electric grid, how much how much effort should be contributed to this process? The potential investor should spend at least 1 year. And this is with the fact that we produce a lot of excessive energy, and this is because Oblenergo wish to earn money on investors. And the doing business rating just measures this connection to electric grids. Recently, the law on connection to the electric grids was passed in the parliament, and this new law requires just 3 documents for connection. This is Oblenergo, which has to produce technical conditions, technical standards, technical design of the project. The investor just has to sign the contract to describe the needs and pay money. Just imagine that there is a restaurant which whose owner wishes to open this restaurant along the highway. From now, they do not have this barrier for doing business. And now I would like to give the floor to Natalia Shapoval, head of the Economic and Political Studies at the Kyiv School of Economics, associate editor at VoxUkraine. Natalia will describe the deficiencies of all those indices that we mentioned. The deficiency of each index is that trying to produce the generalized picture, they omit many details. For example, they wishes to compare animals who climb the trees, and they take a monkey, an elephant, and any other animal. And of course, among those animals, an elephant will be the weakest among those who climb the trees. So in general, the ratings say nothing about things which remain beyond the attention of those ratings. The index of economic liberties, of course, is good, and we clearly see that the United States take leading position while Ukraine stays in low position, and this corresponds to our general perception of the situation. But Jeffrey Sachs tried to understand how the GDP growth correlates with the economic liberties, and he came to conclusion that the countries which do not grow in their GDP, they nevertheless demonstrate the growth of economic liberties. Also, he pointed out a situation that the United States, China, Sweden, Denmark, they are rather close in rating, and at the same time, Sweden and Denmark, which collect higher taxes and deliver good administrative and other services to the citizens. At the same time, in the United States and China, taxation is much lower, but all those four countries, they remain approximately at the same level of economic liberties. Also, looking at other countries, we may assume that the more the government interferes into the economy and creates some barriers, they may reach similar position to those where the similar position to the countries where the government interferes much lesser to the economy. And this again suggests that despite some tariff barriers, the countries could take very close positions in the economic liberties rating. So the welfare states, of course, they take higher positions, but poor countries, they remain in lower positions. Also, this rating do not take into consideration taxation of a country in general. It takes into consideration just some taxes. Besides that, also the monetary policy is important. The index reviews the monetary policy inside the country, while the EU countries which have rather strong external monetary policy at the level of the Union. This factor is not reflected in the economic liberties rating. Also, such factors as state support of agricultural sector and support some other sectors. This distorts the competition, of course, but this is not taken into consideration by that rating. Also, looking at the labor remuneration and trade unions activities. In Sweden, the government allows trade unions to influence labor remuneration. Actually, there is a pressure on wages. But this is not taken into consideration by the index. It seems to me that the existence of those ratings like economic liberties index, like doing business index, in general, their existence is positive because it allows us to see more factors than just GDP. When Jeffrey Sachs stated that when there is no economic growth, when there is no growth in GDP, then the economy is not successful. The Nobel Prize winner Amartya Sen had written a book, Development as a Freedom. And he pointed out a variety of freedoms and liberties, economic liberties, social liberties, and some other types of liberties, and he emphasized how important for a human being is that the quality of our life is better when we have more liberties, and due to those indices, we started to pay attention at those multiple aspects of liberties. Thank you, Natalia. I would like to give the floor to Serhiy Budkin, partner in the investment banking company FinPoint. It seems to me that investments to Ukraine had shrinked by 4-5 billion. So my question to you is whether those indices are really of primary importance for investors, or when they wish to earn money, they do not pay attention at those indices. I won't speak much. I think the most important issue, which is currently heavily discussed among investors, among those banks which had withdrawn from Ukraine, also we try to facilitate state investments. Pharmastar company was sold in December. And we travel around the country a lot, offering something to investors. The more and more we face the situation that you have nothing to say. Currently, it's very difficult for us to represent the case of investments to Ukraine. After oil shock, the amount of available money shrinked, and there are currently much more countries in the world offering good investment conditions, much better investment conditions than Ukraine. That's why there are much more countries which can offer something to investors. So any picture which allows me to speak in favor of Ukraine doing any presentation for potential investors, any such index rating is good for me. Those indices, they allow to classify the work and to assess the work of the government, of the parliament, and they could be used as a KPI. Actually, today all our discussions are about redistribution of the national wealth via budget, and I exist between Ukraine and Australia. I review the level of discussions, and I could say that during the last year, the most meaningful discussion, economic discussion, was between Madam Yareska and Yuzhanina. And we should think about influencing the country's life, not just during the next 2-3 days or weeks, but for several years ahead. Now I am pleased to introduce Hlib Vyshlinskiy, Executive Director of the Center for Economic Strategy. Hlib would like to present what do the investors, potential investors, dislike in Ukraine. I would ask you to open the presentation once again.
Please show slide 21. The matter is this is the data, the survey of Business Association among its members. European Business Association for a long time has been conducting surveys of investment attractiveness of Ukraine. And at the beginning, there was a slide. Maybe it's worth seeing with the dynamics of this indicator. It shows a lot, and shows the level of investment attractiveness of Ukraine. And this slide shows what should be done. Here, 39%. They say it is the key point is fighting corruption, 25 reform of taxation, 24% judiciary reform, and 14% of speeding up reforms, and 8% clearance of state institutions from bureaucracy. So the key topics, and you know that some of these topics are not related to politics actually and to economy. And to end with this presentation, please turn back to one of the first slides in order to see where we are. Here it is. The slide shows starting from 2008, we have only small period, 2010, when we had expectations of good results, and the indicator was 3.4. After this, it fell, and we have a terrible crisis and all that. But the level we assess the attractiveness, the assessment is higher than of attractiveness is higher than in previous years, and we speak about the level of corruption, but it is not so bad for investment that it was, and in previous government rule. And I wanted to summarize the information. The main thing we discussed and the investors discussed, what detracts investment. These are high risks, unpredictable risks. That's why it, as Serhiy said, that's why people are undecided to invest in Ukraine. This is corruption, judicial system, macroeconomic instability, and currency exchange limitations and limitations for foreign investment, and also stock exchange, and also the most risk factor is the conflict in the east. And we have a problem that objectively Ukraine lost attractiveness in absolute terms, both in dynamics and in absolute terms. If we are speaking about economic development, starting from 2009, after the crisis of 2008, stagnation is in the markets of Ukraine. After the period of 2010-2011, starting from 2012, we have an economic decline here in Ukraine. It was firstly, then it accelerated due to some serious reasons, and it shows that investors, they are accustomed to the situation, that the dynamics of the market and its absolute volume is lower than they saw years ago. And secondly, at that, we don't have factors that can give us prospects for accelerated growth. And this is not about macroeconomic situation, that it is impossible at the macroeconomic level. The problem is in the existing power, that they do not generate good news, and they think within the framework that they should sell the country, but they speak about retail and merchandise and put it at on the lower shelves, where products for poor people are. So the most difficult short-term development is that Ukrainian market reduced in monetary terms due to devaluation as well. There are some things that we can influence on, and others we are not able to influence on. And the companies of some level, they take the decision that they work only on the top 30 markets of the world. And if we're speaking about, so Ukraine have zero chances to get in this category for the manager that take this decision, and this decision won't be taken. As Serhiy said, those money that were 10 years ago that was ready to be invested, and the markets of Central and Eastern Europe, after the decommunization and there's all the investors, they become more selective. If we look at Raiffeisen Bank, there was a discussion, and it didn't lead to the selling, but buying of EBRD package. And this bank also, it came out of the capitals of other banks in other regions. So this region is not on the radar for the investors. What we can do about it? Everything that depends on power. We can reduce the risks. It's not easy, but we should work in this direction. Also, judiciary system, prosecutor's office, SBU, state fiscal service. The president is responsible. We usually speak about the government, but if we are speaking about the risks, judiciary, prosecutor's office, and SBU is the sphere of interest for the president and his responsibility. Also, the reduction of taxes, we improved and lifted the pressure on business, and we hope that we should stop at this and to provide low budget deficit. So we won't go to a mission of and spiraling and devaluation. And speaking about what Serhiy said, there should be work carried out in order to Ukrainian power is not involved in these processes. They try to get their piece of pie for themselves, and they don't want to find a new pie. And the criteria for investment, the investment should be the criteria of effectiveness of economic policy, and I'm thankful to my colleagues from Vox that this topic is discussed. It's a very fruitful discussion, and we have 5 minutes. If you have some questions, we are ready to answer. Thank you. As a conclusion, it was evident that we think alike, and we believe that indices are needed, that they reflect the reality. And I would like also to support Gleb and Serhiy in that we cannot postpone judiciary reform and tax reform. But we know that some successful cases are sold, but we should speak about them, because we cannot fail constantly. And maybe it's not the case, actually, here in Ukraine. Thank you very much.